I should have known better than to wear the blue dress. Derek hated when I wore blue, said it made me look like I was trying too hard, like I wanted attention from other men. But tonight, sitting across from him at Mafia, one of Miami's most exclusive Italian restaurants, I realized I'd worn it on purpose. Some part of me, buried deep beneath years of walking on eggshells, wanted to push back, wanted to see if there was still any fight left in me. "You're not even listening to me, Sophie." Derek's voice cut through my thoughts, sharp and accusatory. His fingers drummed against the white tablecloth, a rhythm I'd learned to recognize as a warning. "I've been talking for 5 minutes about the merger, and you're just staring at your pasta like it's the most interesting thing in the world." "I'm sorry," I said automatically, the words as familiar as breathing. "I'm listening now. Tell me about the merger." He leaned back in his chair, his gray suit perfectly pressed, his blonde hair swept back in that way he spent 30 minutes achieving every morning. To anyone watching, we probably looked like the perfect couple, young professionals enjoying an expensive dinner, maybe celebrating an anniversary. They couldn't see the way my stomach nodded every time his voice rose slightly, or how I'd learned to calculate the exact angle to tilt my head to show I was paying attention without appearing challenging. "It's too late now," he said, reaching for his wine glass. "The moment's past. You've ruined it, like you ruin everything." I felt the familiar sting behind my eyes but forced it back. I would not cry here, not in public, not where people could see. That was a rule I'd made for myself 2 years ago, after the first time he'd made me cry at a restaurant, and then spent the entire drive home telling me how embarrassing I was, how weak, how pathetic. "Derek, please." "Please what?" He set his glass down hard enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. An older man and woman, probably in their 60s, quickly looked away when Derek's eyes met theirs. "Please forgive you for being a self-centered bitch who can't even pretend to care about my career." "Is that what you were going to say?" The words hit me like physical blows. I'd taught myself not to flinch anymore, but my hands trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass. Around us, the restaurant continued its elegant symphony, the clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. How could the world just keep going when mine was crumbling? "I do care about your career," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just had a long day at the gallery. The new exhibition opens next week and—" "Oh, the gallery." His laugh was cruel. "Your little art project. Sophie, when are you going to grow up and get a real job? You play with paintings all day and call it work. It's embarrassing." I taught art history at Miami-Dade College 3 days a week and curated exhibitions at a small gallery in Wynwood the other days. I loved my work, or at least I used to love it, before Derek had spent 3 years systematically destroying every bit of confidence I had in myself. Now, I couldn't look at a painting without hearing his voice in my head, telling me my interpretations were stupid. My eye for composition was pedestrian. My passion was childish. "You're right," I said, because agreeing was always easier than fighting. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it anymore, Sophie." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper I knew too well. "I'm tired of your apologies. I'm tired of your excuses. I'm tired of you." My heart stopped. This was it. The moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and hoping for. Was he finally going to end this? Would I finally be free? "Derek, if you want to break up..." "Break up?" His eyes widened in mock surprise. "Why would I want to break up? I've invested 3 years in fixing you. I'm not going to throw that away just because you had a bad day." He reached across the table and grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging in just hard enough to hurt, without leaving a mark. He'd perfected that technique. "We're going to finish this dinner like civilized people. You're going to smile and nod, and act like the grateful girlfriend you should be. And when we get home, you're dead." The words hung in the air between us, as tangible as the breadbasket on the table. "When we get home, you're dead." He'd said things like this before, threats that lived in the gray area between figure of speech and genuine danger. I never knew which one he meant. That was part of the control, part of what kept me frozen. I should have screamed. Should have thrown my wine in his face and run. Should have done any of the things I'd imagined doing 1,000 times during my sleepless nights. Instead, I sat there, feeling the pressure of his fingers on my wrist, watching his face settle back into that smooth, charming mask he wore for the world. "Understood?" he asked, his voice perfectly pleasant again, as if he'd just asked me to pass the salt. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good girl." He released my wrist and picked up his fork, cutting into his osso buco with precise, measured movements. "Now smile. People are watching." I forced my lips into something resembling a smile, feeling like a marionette with tangled strings. My wrist throbbed where he'd grabbed me. "When we get home, you're dead." The words echoed in my mind, growing louder with each repetition. That's when I noticed him. The man at the table next to ours. Not the elderly couple, but the other direction, where a man sat alone. He wasn't looking at us exactly. He was cutting into his steak with careful attention, but something about his posture told me he'd heard everything. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense. He looked to be in his early 30s. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all angles and intensity, wearing a black shirt that probably cost more than my rent. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw something in his dark gaze that made my breath catch. Recognition. Not of me specifically, but of the situation. He knew exactly what was happening at our table. And unlike everyone else in this restaurant who'd chosen to look away, to pretend they hadn't heard Derek's threat, this man looked angry. I quickly dropped my gaze back to my plate, my heart hammering. The last thing I needed was for Derek to notice someone paying attention to us. That would only make things worse when we got home. If we got home. When we get home, you're dead. For the first time in 3 years, a small, desperate part of me wondered if I should take those words literally. If tonight might be the night that Derek's anger finally crossed the line from psychological torture to something I couldn't survive. The thought should have terrified me more than it did. Instead, I felt a strange, detached calm settling over me, like I was watching this dinner happen to someone else. I mechanically lifted my fork to my mouth, tasting nothing. Derek was talking again, something about his firm's new client, his voice smooth and professional, as if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened. This was his gift. The ability to shift between monster and charming boyfriend in the space of a heartbeat. It was what had kept me trapped for so long. After each explosion, there would be days, sometimes weeks, of the Derek I'd fallen in love with. Thoughtful, funny, attentive. Just enough to make me question my memories of his cruelty, to make me think maybe I had been overreacting, maybe I was the problem. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the public nature of his threat, the way he hadn't even bothered to lower his voice. Maybe it was the look in that stranger's eyes, reminding me that normal people didn't talk to their partners this way. Or maybe I'd just finally reached my breaking point. "Excuse me," I said quietly, setting down my fork. "I need to use the restroom." Derek's eyes narrowed slightly. "We're in the middle of dinner. I'll just be a minute." He studied me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating whether this was an attempt to escape, to call someone, to do something other than what I'd said. Finally, he waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, but don't take forever. And fix your makeup. You look tired." I stood on shaking legs and made my way toward the back of the restaurant, past tables of laughing couples and clinking glasses, past the life I'd never have. The bathroom was mercifully empty, all marble and soft lighting and the faint scent of expensive soap. I locked myself in a stall and finally let myself breathe. "When we get home, you're dead." My phone was in my purse. I could call someone, but who? My parents had retired to Oregon last year, too far away to help. My best friend Lisa had tried to convince me to leave Derek a dozen times, but I'd pushed her away, unable to face her "I told you so's." I'd systematically isolated myself, exactly as Derek had wanted me to. I heard the bathroom door open and froze, listening to footsteps, waiting to hear if it was Derek coming to check on me. But the footsteps were light, feminine, and after a moment, the sound of water running at the sinks. I couldn't hide in here forever. Eventually, I'd have to go back out there, smile through the rest of dinner, get in Derek's car, and drive home to whatever awaited me. When we get home, you're dead. Unless I didn't get in the car. Unless I walked out of this restaurant and kept walking. But where would I go? I had $23 in cash and a credit card Derek monitored. I had no plan, no resources, no safe place to run. I was trapped, and we both knew it. Taking a deep breath, I left the stall and washed my hands, avoiding my reflection in the mirror. I didn't want to see whatever truth might be written on my face. Then I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and prepared to go back to my table. Back to Derek, back to the prison I'd built around myself, one compromise at a time. I pushed open the bathroom door and stepped back into the restaurant. The man from the next table was standing in the hallway, his phone in his hand, looking like he'd been waiting for me. Our eyes met again, and this time, he spoke. "You don't have to go back to that table." I froze in the hallway, my hand still on the bathroom door, staring at this stranger who'd just spoken the words I'd been thinking but didn't dare say out loud. Up close, he was even more striking. Tall, probably 6'2", with the kind of presence that made the elegant hallway feel smaller. His dark eyes held mine with an intensity that should have frightened me but somehow didn't. "Excuse me?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "The man you're with," he said, his accent unmistakably Brazilian, the words shaped with a musical quality that softened their directness. "You don't have to go back to him. Not tonight. Not ever." A dozen responses flashed through my mind. I should have told him he'd misunderstood, that Derek and I were fine, that he should mind his own business. That's what I'd done every other time someone had sensed something was wrong. The concerned professor at work, the neighbor who'd heard raised voices, the server who'd seen Derek grab my arm too tightly. I'd become an expert at lying, at protecting the man who hurt me. But standing there in that hallway, with this stranger's dark eyes full of something that looked like genuine concern, I couldn't make myself say the words. My throat closed up, and to my horror, I felt tears beginning to slip down my cheeks. "I'm sorry," I managed, wiping at my face with shaking hands. I can't. You don't have to explain anything to me." He stepped slightly closer, but not threateningly, keeping a respectful distance. "My name is Rafael Santos. I'm staying at the Mandarin Oriental, room 2847. If you need somewhere safe to go tonight, go there. Tell the front desk you're my guest. They know me. I'll make sure you have somewhere to stay, no strings attached. I can't just..." I shook my head, trying to process what he was offering. "I don't know you. You could be more dangerous than the man who just told you that you're dead when you get home." Raphael's voice was gentle but firm. "Sophie." "Yes. I heard him say your name. I heard everything. I heard how he speaks to you. I heard the threat. And I'm telling you that you have an option." "Why?" The question burst out of me. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. This isn't your problem." Something dark flickered across Raphael's face, a shadow of old pain. "Let's just say I know what it looks like when someone needs help, and I have the resources to provide it." He pulled out his wallet and handed me a hotel keycard. "Take this. It's for a suite on a different floor, one I keep available. Go there now or later tonight, or don't go at all, but you have somewhere to go if you need it. I stared at the key card in his hand, this small piece of plastic that represented an escape route, a way out, a door I'd convinced myself didn't exist. Part of me wanted to grab it desperately, but another part, the part that had been conditioned by 3 years of Derek's control, whispered warnings. This had to be a trap. Men didn't just help women out of the goodness of their hearts. There would be a price. There was always a price. "What do you want from me?" I asked bluntly. "Nothing." Raphael's answer was immediate. "I want nothing from you except for you to be safe. Take the key. Use it or don't. But please don't get in a car with a man who threatens your life." Before I could respond, I heard Derek's voice calling from the dining room. "Sophie? What's taking so long?" Terror seized my chest. If Derek found me talking to another man, especially one who'd obviously overheard our argument, I couldn't imagine what would happen. Raphael seemed to sense my panic because he smoothly pocketed his phone and turned toward the dining room as if he'd just been walking past. "I should go," I whispered. "The offer stands," Raphael said quietly, pressing the key card into my palm and closing my fingers around it. "Room 2847, Mandarin Oriental. You don't have to do this alone." Then he was walking past me, back toward the dining room, leaving me standing in the hallway with a hotel key card burning in my hand and a choice to make. I shoved the card deep into my purse and hurried back to our table, where Derek was settling the bill with exaggerated patience, the way someone might tolerate a child who'd misbehaved. "Finally," he said without looking at me. "Let's go." The drive home was silent, which was somehow worse than his anger. Derek drove his BMW with precise, controlled movements, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel at exactly 10 and 2. I sat in the passenger seat, my purse clutched on my lap, feeling the key card inside like it was radiating heat. "When we get home, you're dead." I watched the Miami streets pass by the window. The Art Deco buildings of South Beach giving way to the high-rises of Brickell, then to our neighborhood in Coconut Grove. Each familiar landmark brought us closer to home, closer to whatever awaited me there. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe Derek had just been speaking figuratively. Maybe he'd cool down during the drive and we'd get home and he'd apologize like he sometimes did. Maybe everything would be fine. But I didn't believe that anymore. We pulled into the parking garage of our building, the security gate sliding shut behind us with a finality that made my stomach drop. Derek turned off the engine and sat there for a moment in the silence, his hand still on the wheel. "Derek," I started. "Get out of the car, Sophie." His voice was flat, emotionless, which terrified me more than his anger ever had. I knew all his moods, had learned to navigate them like a sailor reading storm clouds. But this cold detachment was new. I got out of the car on shaking legs. Derek was already walking toward the elevator, not checking to see if I was following, because he knew I would. Where else would I go? "To the Mandarin Oriental," whispered a small voice in my head, "to room 2847. But that was crazy. I couldn't just run off with a stranger no matter how genuine he'd seemed. That's how women ended up on true crime podcasts. Besides, I'd left Derek before, or tried to, 3 times over the past year. Each time he'd found me within hours, convinced me to come back, promised to change. Each time I'd believed him, or at least been too exhausted to keep fighting. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt eternal. Derek stood in the corner, scrolling through his phone, ignoring me completely. When the doors opened, he strode down the hallway to our apartment, unlocked the door, and walked inside, leaving it open behind him. I stood in the doorway, looking into our home, the sleek, modern furniture Derek had chosen, the abstract art on the walls that he'd told me was actually good, unlike the pieces I liked, the kitchen where I'd spent countless nights cooking elaborate meals to try to please him, this place that had stopped feeling like home years ago and had become just another cage. When we get home, you're dead. Are you coming in, or are you going to stand there all night? Derek called from the living room. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, hearing the lock click with a sound like a coffin closing. Derek was at the bar cart, pouring himself a scotch, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Do you want to know what I've been thinking about during that entire miserable dinner?" he asked, his back still to me. "I've been thinking about how much effort I've put into you, how I took this mediocre art teacher with her head full of impractical dreams and tried to shape you into something worthwhile. Someone I could be proud to have on my arm at firm events. Someone who could hold an intelligent conversation with my colleagues. Derek, please." "Please what?" He turned around, scotch glass in hand, his face a mask of contempt. "Please don't tell you the truth. Please keep pretending that you're enough. You're not enough, Sophie. You never have been." The words should have hurt more than they did. But I'd heard variations of this speech so many times that they'd lost their power. What frightened me now wasn't his words, but his eyes, cold and flat, like looking at a stranger wearing Derek's face. "I think I should leave," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "We both need some space to cool down." "Leave?" Derek laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "And go where exactly? To your pathetic apartment in Wynwood that you can barely afford? Oh, wait. You gave that up when you moved in here, didn't you? Because I convinced you it made sense, that we were building a future together." He was right. I'd given up my lease 8 months ago, moved my few belongings into this apartment that was entirely his. Another way he'd tightened the noose without me realizing it. "I'll stay with a friend," I said, though I had no idea which friend would take me in at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night after I'd spent the last year pushing them all away. "Go ahead," Derek said, waving his glass dismissively. "Call Lisa. See if she'll take you in after you stopped returning her calls 6 months ago. Or maybe call that professor who was so concerned about you last spring. What was his name?" "Oh, right. You don't remember because you told him everything was fine, and to mind his own business." My phone was in my purse. I could call Lisa. She might be angry, but she'd help me. Probably. Unless she'd finally given up on me, and I wouldn't blame her if she had. Or I could use that keycard burning a hole in my purse. "I'm going to pack a bag," I said quietly. Derek's eyes narrowed. "Like hell you are." He moved fast, crossing the living room in 3 strides and grabbing my arm, his fingers digging into the same spot he'd held during dinner. The scotch glass was still in his other hand, and for a horrifying moment, I thought he might throw it at me. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his face inches from mine. "We're going to sit down and talk about your behavior tonight like adults. We're going to discuss how you're going to make this up to me, how you're going to prove that you deserve the life I've given you." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the way he said, "the life I've given you," as if I should be grateful for the privilege of being controlled and belittled. Maybe it was the pressure of his fingers on my arm, the casual way he touched me like I was his property. Or maybe I'd just finally run out of fear. "Let go of me," I said. "Excuse me." I said let go of me. Derek's eyes widened slightly, surprised by my tone. For 3 years, I'd never directly defied him like this. I'd cried, I'd apologized, I'd tried to please him, but I'd never looked him in the eye and told him no. "Sophie, you're being hysterical." "I'm being clear." My voice was stronger now, fed by 3 years of swallowed anger. "Let go of my arm, or I'll scream so loud that every neighbor on this floor will hear me." For a long moment, we stood frozen, locked in a battle of wills I never thought I'd have the courage to fight. Then, Derek released my arm with a harsh laugh. "Fine. Have your little tantrum, but you're not leaving this apartment." He turned his back on me, dismissing me, supremely confident that I wouldn't actually walk out that door. That's how thoroughly he'd broken me. He didn't even need to physically stop me anymore. The cage was in my mind now. But something had shifted in that hallway at the restaurant. A stranger named Raphael had looked at me and seen someone worth saving. And maybe, just maybe, I could start seeing that too. While Derek poured himself another scotch, I quietly grabbed my purse and walked to the door. My hand was on the knob when he spoke. "If you walk out that door, Sophie, we're done. I mean it. You'll never come back here." I turned to look at him one last time. This man I'd loved, or thought I loved, before he'd systematically destroyed who I was. He stood in his expensive suit in his expensive apartment, surrounded by all the trappings of success, and I realized I felt nothing for him but pity. "Good," I said, and walked out. The lobby of the Mandarin Oriental was almost empty at 11 p.m. Just a few hotel guests moving through the gleaming space with its soaring ceilings and elegant furnishings. I stood near the entrance, still shaking from adrenaline, my purse clutched against my chest like armor. I'd driven here in a daze, using the Uber app on my phone before Derek could track me, watching my apartment building disappear in the rearview window of a stranger's Honda. Now I was here, and the reality of what I'd done was starting to sink in. I'd left. I'd actually left. And I had nowhere to go except to a hotel room offered by a man I'd met for 30 seconds in a hallway. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was... "May I help you, miss?" The concierge, an elegant woman in her 50s with kind eyes, had noticed me hovering near the entrance. My voice cracked. "I'm supposed to be meeting Rafael Santos, room 2847. The woman's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. "Of course. Mr. Santos mentioned you might be arriving. I'll let him know you're here." She picked up the phone and spoke quietly, then smiled at me. "He's on his way down. Please, have a seat." She gestured toward a seating area, and I sank gratefully into one of the plush chairs, feeling like I might collapse if I stood much longer. My phone buzzed in my purse. Derek calling. Then a text. Then another. I turned the phone off without reading them, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the buttons. "Sophie." I looked up to find Raphael approaching, now wearing dark jeans and a white button-down shirt instead of the formal outfit from dinner. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed natural to him, drawing the eyes of the few people in the lobby without seeming to try. "You came," he said simply. I didn't know where else to go. The admission cost me, but I was too exhausted for pride. I left him. I actually left him. Good. Raphael settled into the chair across from me, keeping a respectful distance. "How are you feeling?" How was I feeling? Terrified, exhilarated, numb, like I might throw up or cry or laugh hysterically at any moment. "I don't know," I admitted. "This doesn't feel real." "It's real," Raphael said gently, "and you're safe here." I meant what I said, no strings attached. I have a suite on the 32nd floor that I keep available for business associates. It's yours for as long as you need it. Why? The question came out more desperately than I intended. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I could be, I don't know, crazy or lying or... You're not crazy and you're not lying. Raphael leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes holding mine. Sophie, I grew up watching my mother endure what you're enduring. I was 10 years old when I realized my father was a monster, and I was powerless to help her. She stayed with him for 15 years before she finally found the courage to leave. I swore to myself that if I ever had the power to help someone in that situation, I would. His honesty shocked me. I'd expected denials or vague explanations, not this raw admission. I'm sorry, I said softly. About your mother. She's strong now, stronger than she ever was with him. Raphael stood and extended his hand. Come, let me show you to the suite. Then you can decide what you want to do. Stay here, call a friend, whatever you need. I took his hand and let him pull me to my feet. His palm was warm and calloused, not the soft hands of someone who only worked behind a desk. Up close, I noticed the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his shoulders carried tension despite his calm demeanor. This was a man who'd seen violence, I realized, who'd perhaps dealt in it. The thought should have frightened me, but somehow it didn't. We rode the elevator in silence to the 32nd floor. Raphael led me down a hallway to a door at the end, used his keycard to open it, and gestured for me to enter first. The suite was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, elegant furniture in soft grays and whites, a full kitchen, a separate bedroom, and a bathroom that was bigger than my old apartment's living room. It was the kind of place I'd only seen in magazines, impossibly luxurious and far removed from the world I lived in. "The refrigerator is stocked," Raphael said, staying near the entrance. "There are clothes in the closet. My assistant keeps a selection for guests, various sizes. They should fit you. The phone by the bed is a direct line to concierge services. They can get you anything you need at any hour." "Raphael, I can't..." I turned to face him, overwhelmed. "This is too much. I can't accept this. You can, and you should." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "Tonight you need somewhere safe to sleep. Tomorrow we can figure out the rest. But right now, just breathe and let yourself be safe." Safe. When was the last time I'd felt truly safe? Not just physically protected, but emotionally secure, able to relax my guard and simply exist without fear? I couldn't remember. "Thank you," I whispered. And then, to my embarrassment, I burst into tears. Not delicate tears, but ugly gasping sobs that shook my whole body. 3 years of suppressed emotion came pouring out of me in that luxurious hotel suite, in front of this stranger who'd shown me more kindness in 3 hours than Derek had in 3 years. Raphael didn't move closer or try to touch me, respecting my space. Instead, he simply waited, his presence solid and reassuring, until the storm passed and I was left hiccuping and wiping my face with my hands. "I'm sorry," I managed. I'm not normally." "You don't need to apologize." Raphael pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to me. An actual cloth handkerchief, the kind no one carried anymore. "You've been through something traumatic. This is a normal response." I took the handkerchief and wiped my face, trying to pull myself together. "I should probably try to sleep. I have to teach tomorrow." I stopped, realizing I had no idea what tomorrow would look like. Could I go back to work? Would Derek show up there? Did I even have clothes to wear besides the blue dress I was currently destroying with my tears? "Tomorrow will sort itself out," Raphael said, reading my panic. "For now, just rest. I'm in room 2847, 6 floors down. Call if you need anything. The concierge can connect you. Otherwise, I'll check on you in the morning if that's all right." "It's all right," I said, meaning it. Having someone check on me, someone who actually cared if I was okay, felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. Raphael nodded and moved toward the door, then paused. "Sophie, one more thing. I think you should consider not going to work tomorrow. Give yourself time to think about what you want to do next. And if you're worried about money..." "I can't take money from you," I said quickly. "The room is already too much." "Think about it," was all he said. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone in this beautiful suite with nothing but the clothes on my back and a future that was suddenly terrifyingly open. I walked to the window and looked out at the Miami skyline, the city I'd lived in for 8 years, spread out before me like a glittering promise. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably still calling me, leaving increasingly angry voicemails, perhaps even trying to track my phone. The thought made me nauseous, but it also made me angry. I was 25 years old. I had a master's degree in art history. I taught college students and curated exhibitions, and had once believed I was capable of anything. How had I let one man reduce me to this? A frightened shell of myself, jumping at shadows, apologizing for existing. My phone buzzed in my purse again, even though I'd turned it off. No, wait, that was a different phone, the hotel room phone. I picked it up cautiously. Miss Reynolds, this is Sarah at the concierge desk. I wanted to let you know that a man claiming to be your boyfriend has called asking for you. We've informed him that we have no guest by your name registered. However, if you'd like, we can flag your presence as confidential in our system and alert security to prevent any issues. My blood ran cold. Derek had found me already. Of course he had. He probably tracked the Uber on my credit card. Or maybe he'd just called every expensive hotel in Miami until he found one that confirmed my presence. Please flag it as confidential, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And yes, alert security. Thank you. Of course, Miss Reynolds. Mr. Santos has also authorized us to deny any inquiries about you. You're perfectly safe here. After I hung up, I stood in the center of the suite, my heart pounding. Derek knew where I was. He was already trying to find me, to pull me back into his orbit. Part of me wanted to call him back, to smooth things over, to take the path of least resistance like I always had. But I didn't. Instead, I walked to the bedroom, found one of the guest robes in the closet, soft white cotton that smelled like lavender, and took the longest, hottest shower of my life. I washed off the dinner, the argument, the fear, letting it all spiral down the drain with the expensive hotel soap. When I emerged, I felt almost human again. I found clothes in the closet like Raphael had said, yoga pants and a soft t-shirt that fit perfectly, along with new underwear still in packaging and a selection of toiletries. His assistant was thorough. I'd give them that. I should have been exhausted, but I was too wired to sleep. Instead, I made tea in the kitchenette and sat by the window, watching the city lights blur through my own reflection in the glass. I thought about my mother, who'd taught me to be independent, to never rely on a man for my identity. She'd be devastated to see what I'd let happen to myself. I thought about my art history professor in grad school, Dr. Martinez, who told me I had a brilliant eye for composition and interpretation. Would she even recognize the woman I'd become? I thought about Lisa, my best friend, who'd tried so hard to reach me before I'd pushed her away completely. She deserved an apology, but I didn't know if I could face her yet, admit how thoroughly I'd lost myself. And I thought about Raphael, this stranger who'd appeared in my life at exactly the right moment, offering help with no apparent expectation of reward. What kind of man did that? What kind of businessman kept a luxury suite available just for business associates? And why did his kindness feel almost as dangerous as Derek's cruelty, in its own way? My phone buzzed again. Derek, I was sure. But when I turned it on to check, I found something else that made my stomach drop. An email from my credit card company about suspicious charges. Derek had tried to use our joint credit card to book a room at the Mandarin Oriental. The charge had been declined. I'd had the card canceled 6 months ago after he'd used it to buy an expensive watch, for us, that only he ever wore. But the attempt itself told me everything I needed to know. He was hunting me. I turned the phone off again and considered throwing it out the window. But no, that was fear talking, and I was done letting fear make my decisions. Instead, I'd be smart. Tomorrow, I'd figure out how to protect myself legally, how to establish boundaries, how to reclaim the life I'd given away piece by piece. Tonight, I'd sleep in this safe, beautiful room. I'd let myself be cared for by a stranger's unexpected kindness, and I'd start believing, just a little bit, that I deserved to be safe. I must have fallen asleep on the couch because I woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of someone knocking gently on the door. I sat up groggily, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, before yesterday's events came flooding back. "Just a moment," I called, running my fingers through my tangled hair and trying to make myself presentable. When I opened the door, I found Raphael standing there with a tray from room service. Coffee, fresh fruit, pastries, scrambled eggs. "Good morning," he said. "I wasn't sure if you'd eaten, so I took the liberty of ordering breakfast. May I come in?" I stepped back to let him enter, suddenly self-conscious in the borrowed clothes with no makeup and my hair a mess. Raphael set the tray on the dining table as if this were perfectly normal, as if he often delivered breakfast to women he'd rescued the night before. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "Until your knock woke me up, I didn't even remember falling asleep." "Your body needed rest." Raphael poured coffee for both of us without asking if I wanted any, somehow knowing that I did. "Sophie, we need to talk about what happens next." My stomach clenched. Here it was, the price for his help. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Derek is going to keep looking for you. He called the hotel again this morning, claiming there was a family emergency and he needed to reach you. The staff turned him away, but he's not going to stop." "I know." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, needing its warmth. "I'll figure something out. Get my own place. Maybe move to a different part of the city." "That won't be enough," Raphael interrupted gently. "Men like Derek don't accept rejection easily. He's already shown he's willing to escalate. You need real protection, Sophie. Legal protection, at minimum. Possibly more." "More like what?" Raphael was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I have resources, connections. I can make sure Derek understands that if he comes near you again, there will be consequences." Something about the way he said consequences made my skin prickle. This wasn't just about lawyers and restraining orders. Raphael was offering something else, something darker. "Who are you?" I asked bluntly. "Really? Because businessmen don't usually keep luxury suites available for random women they meet in restaurants, and they don't talk about consequences the way you just did." Raphael met my eyes steadily, and I saw him making a decision. "You're right to be cautious. Yes, I'm a businessman. I own import-export companies in both Miami and São Paulo, but my family has other interests as well, interests that exist in the gray areas of legality." "The Mafia," I said. It should have sounded ridiculous, like something from a movie. But looking at Raphael, at the way he carried himself, the casual authority in his voice, the expensive watch on his wrist that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, it made horrible sense. "We don't use that word," Raphael said with a slight smile. "But yes, my family has ties to certain organizations in Brazil. I've spent the last 10 years trying to legitimize our business operations, but some connections can't be completely severed. And sometimes, those connections can be useful." I should have been terrified, should have run out of that hotel room immediately. Instead, I found myself asking, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve honesty. If you accept my help, you need to understand what that means. I can protect you from Derek, absolutely and completely. But that protection comes from a world you may not want to be part of." I thought about Derek, about his threats and his control, about the possibility of spending months or years looking over my shoulder, wondering when he'd show up at my work or my home. I thought about restraining orders that were just pieces of paper, about how many women ended up hurt or dead because the system failed to protect them. And I thought about this man sitting across from me, offering me a way out that was unconventional and probably dangerous, but also possibly the only real protection available. "What would accepting your help actually entail?" I asked. Raphael smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it reached his eyes. "First, we eat breakfast. Then we talk about options, and then you decide what kind of future you want, Sophie. One thing I can promise you, it will be your choice, Not Derek's, not mine. Yours. I picked up my fork and tried the eggs, which were perfect, fluffy and seasoned with just enough salt. As I ate, I realized that I was actually hungry for the first time in months. My body was reminding me that I was still alive, still here, still capable of feeling something other than fear. "Tell me about the options," I said. And Raphael began to talk. Over the next 2 hours, Raphael laid out 3 options for me with the kind of clinical precision that told me he'd dealt with situations like this before. I listened, drinking coffee and watching the Miami morning bloom beyond the windows, trying to process the fact that my life had become a situation that required options. "First option," Raphael said, leaning back in his chair with his own coffee cup balanced on his knee. "You handle this the traditional way. We get you a lawyer, a good one, someone I know who specializes in domestic violence cases. You file for a restraining order, you document everything Derek has said and done, and you let the legal system protect you." "You don't sound very convinced that would work," I observed, "because I'm not." Raphael's honesty was brutal, but refreshing after 3 years of Derek's manipulations. "Restraining orders are pieces of paper, Sophie. They work for men who respect boundaries, who care about legal consequences. Derek sounds like someone who's made a career out of finding loopholes, who's smart enough to know how to toe the line without technically crossing it." He was right. Derek was a corporate lawyer with a firm full of connections and resources. He'd find ways around a restraining order, would probably even enjoy the intellectual challenge of circumventing it. "What's option 2? "Option 2 is you disappear." Raphael set down his coffee cup and leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "I have a house in São Paulo that sits empty most of the year. You could go there, start over completely. New city, new country, new life. I'd help you with the visa situation, set you up with enough money to get established, connect you with people who could help you find work. Derek would never find you in Brazil." The idea was tempting in its simplicity. Just run away, leave everything behind, start fresh somewhere no one knew me. But even as I considered it, I knew I couldn't do it. Running away felt too much like letting Derek win, like letting him keep all the pieces of my life I'd built before him, my job, my friends, my city. "And option 3? Raphael was quiet for a moment, and I got the sense he was weighing how much to tell me. Finally, he said, "Option 3 is you stay in Miami, and I make sure Derek understands that you're under my protection. That if he comes near you, threatens you, or causes you any trouble whatsoever, he'll have to answer to me." "You mean you'd threaten him?" "I mean, I would make it very clear to him that pursuing you further would be catastrophically unwise." Raphael's voice was soft, but somehow more menacing for its gentleness. "Men like Derek respond to power, Sophie. He controlled you because you had less power than him, financially, physically, socially. But I have considerably more power than Derek does, in ways that matter beyond courtrooms and corporate hierarchies." "You're talking about violence," I said flatly. "I'm talking about consequences." Raphael held my gaze steadily. "I wouldn't hurt him unless he forced the issue. But I would make sure he understood what those consequences would look like if he did force it. Sometimes the threat of power is more effective than its application." I stood up and walked to the window, needing space to think. Down on Biscayne Bay, a sailboat glided across the blue water, so peaceful and normal. How had my life gotten so complicated that I was sitting in a hotel room discussing mob protection with a Brazilian criminal? Except he wasn't just a criminal, I realized. He was also the man who'd seen me in distress and offered help with no expectation of reward. Who'd given me a safe place to sleep and breakfast in the morning. Who was sitting behind me right now, patiently waiting for me to make my own decision instead of telling me what to do. "What do you get out of this?" I asked, turning back to face him. "Any of it. Why help me at all?" Raphael stood and joined me at the window, but kept a respectful distance, never crowding my space. You want the truth? I see my mother in you. She had that same look in her eyes when she finally decided to leave my father. Terrified but determined, broken but not destroyed. I was a teenager then, powerless to help her beyond giving her money I'd saved and lying to my father about where she'd gone. What happened to her? She rebuilt her life, went to college, became a social worker, spent the next 20 years helping other women escape situations like hers. She's the strongest person I know. He smiled slightly. She'd like you, I think. She'd probably tell me I'm crazy for trusting you. She'd be right too, Raphael agreed. Sophie, I'm not a good man. I've done things I'm not proud of, things I can't take back. But I try to do right when I can, in the small ways available to me. Helping you feels right. His honesty disarmed me. I'd spent 3 years with Derek, who'd lied and manipulated and gaslighted until I couldn't trust my own perceptions. Raphael's straightforward acknowledgement of his flaws was somehow more reassuring than any claims of virtue would have been. I need to think about this, I said. All of it. It's too much to decide right now. Of course. Raphael checked his watch. A Patek Philippe, I noticed, the kind that costs 6 figures. I have a meeting at noon, but I'll be back this evening. In the meantime, the suite is yours. Order room service, use the spa, do whatever you need to clear your head. And Sophie? Yes? Your phone. You should turn it on and read Derek's messages. Not because his words matter, but because you need to see the pattern of his behavior documented. If you do decide to pursue legal action, those messages will be evidence. After Raphael left, I sat with my phone in my hands for a long time before turning it on. When I finally did, it exploded with notifications. 47 text messages from Derek, 15 missed calls, 3 voicemails. I made myself read through all of them, watching the progression from anger to bargaining to threats. The first message, sent 20 minutes after I'd left the apartment. Where the hell did you go? Get back here right now. An hour later. Sophie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Come home and we'll talk. Then, as the night wore on, and I didn't respond. You're being childish. This is ridiculous. You can't just run away from our problems. By 3 a.m., the tone had shifted. I know you're at a hotel. I'm going to find you. You can't hide from me. The most recent message, sent just an hour ago. You're making a mistake, Sophie. Everything you have is because of me. Your job, your friends, your entire life. Without me, you're nothing. Come back before you ruin everything. I took screenshots of everything, feeling sick as I documented the spiral of Derek's anger. Raphael was right. This was evidence. This showed the pattern of control, the threats, the refusal to accept my decision to leave. But more than that, reading these messages crystallized something for me. Derek truly believed he owned me, that I had no right to leave, that my entire existence was valid only in relation to him. The Derek who'd sent these messages wasn't going to accept a restraining order. He wasn't going to respect boundaries. He was going to escalate until something terrible happened. I needed option 3. I needed Raphael's protection, dangerous as it might be, because the alternative, trying to handle this alone through conventional channels, would leave me vulnerable to a man who'd already proven he didn't respect the law or my autonomy. I spent the afternoon in the hotel spa, letting a massage therapist work 3 years of tension from my shoulders while I tried to accept that my life had fundamentally changed. Then, I returned to the suite and did something I hadn't done in almost a year. I called Lisa. She answered on the 3rd ring. Sophie? Oh my God, Sophie, is that really you? Hi, Lisa. My voice cracked on her name. I'm sorry I've been so awful. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry for everything. Where are you? Are you okay? Sophie, talk to me. So I did. I told her everything. About Derek's escalation, about leaving him, about Raphael and the options I was considering. To her credit, Lisa listened without interrupting, though I could hear her sharp intake of breath when I mentioned Raphael's connections. You're talking about the mob, Sophie. Like actual organized crime. I know how it sounds. It sounds insane. It also sounds like maybe the only thing that'll keep you safe from Derek. Lisa sighed heavily. I wish you'd let me help you before it got to this point. I know. I wasn't ready. And you are now? I thought about that question, really considered it. Was I ready to accept Raphael's help, knowing what it meant? Ready to potentially enter his world with all its dangers and moral compromises? I'm ready to survive, I said, whatever that takes. Then I support you. But Sophie, promise me you'll be careful. This Raphael guy might seem like a white knight, but men like that, men with power like that, they always want something eventually. I know, I said, though I wasn't sure I did. After we hung up, I felt lighter. One connection restored, one bridge rebuilt. Lisa had given me her new address and made me promise to visit soon, once things settled down. It was a start. When Raphael returned that evening, I'd made my decision. He must have seen it on my face because he simply nodded and sat down across from me. Option 3, I said. I want to stay in Miami. I want my life back. And I want Derek to understand that he can't control me anymore. You're sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. Raphael studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Then we do this right. First, we still get you that lawyer, because we'll need legal documentation of Derek's behavior. Second, I'll arrange a meeting with Derek, somewhere public, to make my position clear. Third, you'll need somewhere to live. Somewhere safe, where Derek can't just show up. I can't stay here indefinitely, I protested. This suite must cost thousands per night. I own the hotel, Raphael said casually, and my jaw dropped. Well, a percentage of it, through various holding companies. The point is you can stay as long as you need to. But if you'd prefer somewhere that feels more permanent, I have other properties. Raphael, I can't just live in properties you own. I need to be independent, to rebuild my own life. Then we'll figure out a way for you to do that while staying safe, he said simply. Sophie, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to give you options Derek never did. You want independence? Fine. We'll structure this so you have that. But right now, your immediate safety is the priority. He was right, and I hated that he was right. I couldn't think about long-term independence when Derek was actively hunting me. Okay, I agreed. So what's the plan? Raphael pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking rapid Portuguese to whoever answered. Then he looked at me. Tomorrow afternoon, Derek is going to receive a message asking him to meet at a coffee shop in Brickell to discuss returning your belongings. He'll come because he'll think he's getting control back. And then what? And then I'll explain to him, in terms he can't misunderstand, that you're not available to him anymore, that any further attempts to contact you, threaten you, or interfere with your life will have consequences he won't enjoy. Will it work? Raphael's smile was cold. It'll work. Men like Derek are bullies, Sophie. They're only brave when they have all the power. Take away that power, and they fold remarkably quickly. And if he doesn't fold, then I'll make sure he wishes he had. The words should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Safe. Not because I'd found a gentle protector, but because I'd found someone who understood that sometimes safety required force, required the kind of power Derek respected. I want to be there, I said suddenly. At the meeting. I want to see his face when you tell him. Raphael shook his head. That's not a good idea. If Derek sees you, he might... I don't care what he might do. I've spent 3 years being afraid of him, hiding from him, letting him control me through fear. I want to look him in the eyes and let him see that I'm not afraid anymore. You should be afraid, Raphael said bluntly. Fear keeps you cautious, keeps you safe. Then I want him to be afraid too. I met Raphael's dark gaze steadily. Please, I need this. For a long moment he studied me, and I could see him weighing the risks. Finally he nodded. All right, but you'll stay in my car with my driver, where Derek can see you but can't reach you. And if anything goes wrong, if he tries anything, you do exactly what my driver tells you. Understood? Understood. Raphael stood to leave, then paused at the door. Sophie, once we do this, there's no going back. Derek will know about me, about my connections. You'll be associated with me in his mind, probably in others' minds too. Your life is going to change in ways you might not anticipate. It's already changed, I said. The moment I walked out of that apartment, everything changed. At least this way, I get to choose the direction. After he left, I stood at the window watching the city lights again, but this time I didn't feel small or helpless. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something. Not a cliff I might fall from, but a threshold I was choosing to cross. Tomorrow I would face Derek one final time. I would let him see that I'd found someone more powerful than him, someone willing to protect me. And then I would start building the life I should have been living all along, one where I made the choices, where I decided my own worth, where fear didn't dictate my every move. I'd asked Raphael earlier what he got out of helping me. What I hadn't told him was what I was getting out of accepting his help. Not just safety, but permission to believe I deserved to be safe, that I was worth protecting, that my life had value beyond what Derek had told me it did. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The coffee shop Raphael had chosen was in the heart of Brickell's financial district, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, filled with bankers and lawyers having power meetings over pour-over coffee. The kind of place Derek would feel comfortable, where he'd expect to maintain his professional veneer, where he'd think he had the advantage. I sat in Raphael's black Mercedes SUV parked across the street, watching the entrance through tinted windows. Raphael's driver, a man named Marco who looked like he could bench press a small car, sat in the front seat, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly just radiating the kind of calm alertness that suggested he'd done this kind of thing before. Mr. Santos will be fine, Marco said, catching me checking my watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. His English was accented but clear. He knows what he's doing. I know, I said, though my stomach was in knots. I just want this to be over. Through the window, I saw Raphael arrive, walking with that fluid confidence that turned heads even on a busy Miami street. He was wearing a dark suit today, looking every inch the successful businessman, nothing about him suggesting danger. He entered the coffee shop and took a seat at a table near the window, ordering something from the server who appeared instantly. Then I saw Derek. He was walking fast, his expression set in that determined look I knew too well, the one that meant he thought he was about to win. He was wearing his favorite navy suit, the one he wore to important meetings, and carrying a leather portfolio under his arm. Even from across the street, I could read his body language. Confident, in control, ready to reclaim what he considered his property. My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to look away, but forced myself to watch. This was important. I needed to see this. Derek entered the coffee shop, spotted Raphael immediately, and I saw his expression shift to confusion. He'd been expecting to meet someone else, maybe a friend of mine, or a lawyer, not this elegantly dressed stranger sitting calmly at the table. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I watched Derek's body language shift from confusion to wariness as Raphael gestured to the seat across from him. Derek sat, but perched on the edge of his chair, ready to leave. They talked for a few minutes, Raphael speaking in a measured way that suggested he was laying out facts, not making threats. Professional, businesslike. Then Raphael pulled out his phone and showed Derek something on the screen. Even from across the street, I saw Derek's face go white. His hand moved toward his pocket. His own phone, probably. But Raphael shook his head and said something that made Derek's hand stop mid-motion. "What's he showing him?" I whispered. "Evidence," Marco said. "Your messages, I think. Maybe other documentation." But it was more than that, I realized. It had to be. Derek's expression had gone from white to red, his hands clenching on the table. Raphael leaned back casually, said something else, and then gestured toward the window, toward the Mercedes, toward me. Derek's head whipped around, and his eyes found mine through the tinted windows. For a moment, we stared at each other across the street, and I saw so many emotions flash across his face. Shock, rage, fear, and something that might have been genuine hurt. Then his expression hardened into pure hatred. He stood abruptly, leaning over the table to say something to Raphael. Raphael didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked up at Derek with an expression of mild interest, like he was watching something vaguely entertaining. Then Raphael said something, just a few words, that made Derek step back like he'd been pushed. Derek looked at me again, and this time I didn't look away. I met his gaze steadily, channeling every bit of anger and hurt and determination I had into that look. "You don't own me anymore," I thought, willing him to understand. "You never will again." Derek turned and stormed out of the coffee shop, nearly knocking over a woman carrying 2 lattes. He strode down the street in the opposite direction from us, his phone already at his ear, probably calling someone, a lawyer, a friend, someone he thought could help him. Raphael stood, dropped some bills on the table, and walked out of the coffee shop with the same unhurried grace he'd entered with. He crossed the street, opened the back door of the SUV, and slid in next to me. "Well," he said calmly. "That went about as expected." "What did you tell him?" My voice came out shakier than I'd intended. "I told him that you were under my protection now, that any attempt to contact you, follow you, threaten you, or interfere with your life in any way would be considered a personal insult to me and to my associates. I showed him screenshots of his messages to you, along with some other information my people gathered about his activities. Nothing illegal, just embarrassing. Affairs he's had, complaints filed against him at his firm that were buried, that sort of thing." "You investigated him?" "Of course I investigated him. I needed to know who I was dealing with." Raphael's voice was matter-of-fact. "Then I told him that if he persisted in harassing you, all of that information would find its way to the partners at his firm, to the Florida Bar Association, and to several journalists who would be very interested in the story. His career would be over." "And he believed you?" "He believed me when I told him who I am, who my family is." Raphael's expression was unreadable. Men in Derek's world know the Santos name, even if they've never dealt with us directly. They know it's not a name you cross lightly. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely empty. 3 years of my life, reduced to a 10-minute meeting and some barely veiled threats. Was that all it took? Had I suffered for so long when this solution was always available? If only I'd known where to find it. "Sophie." Raphael's voice was gentle. "This isn't over yet. Derek will probably try to retaliate somehow. Do something to feel like he's regaining control. But he'll be careful now. He knows there are consequences. What could he do? Spread rumors about you, maybe. Try to damage your reputation professionally. Call your employer with fabricated complaints." Raphael shrugged. "Petty things, but hurtful. I want you to be prepared for that." Marco started the car and pulled away from the curb, heading back toward the Mandarin Oriental. I watched the Brickell Financial District slide past the windows, these gleaming towers full of people living normal lives, going to normal jobs, having normal problems. I'd been one of them just a week ago. Now I was being driven in an SUV by a man who worked for the mob, having just watched my ex-boyfriend get threatened into staying away from me. "Where does this leave us?" I asked Raphael. "What happens now?" "Now you rebuild your life," Raphael said simply. "You decide what you want to do about work, about where you want to live, about what comes next. And I make sure you have the space and safety to make those decisions freely." "And Derek just leaves me alone? Just like that?" "Just like that." Raphael met my eyes. "Sophie, men like Derek are cowards. They're only brave when they have power and their victim has none. Now the power dynamic has shifted dramatically in your favor. He won't risk coming after you." I wanted to believe him, but I'd lived with Derek's vindictiveness for 3 years. I knew how he held grudges, how he never let a slight go unpunished. As if reading my thoughts, Raphael added, "If he does try something, anything at all, you contact me immediately." I meant what I told him. "You're under my protection now. That's not a temporary arrangement, Sophie. As long as you want it, you have it." "Why?" The question burst out of me again. "Why do you care this much about someone you don't even know?" Raphael was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the passing city. When he spoke, his voice was softer than I'd heard it before. My mother used to ask me that too, when I'd get into fights defending women in our neighborhood, men being rough with their girlfriends. She worried I was going to get hurt or killed, but I couldn't stand by and watch. Not after watching what my father did to her for so many years. "Where's your father now?" "Dead." Raphael's tone was flat. "Car accident, supposedly. 15 years ago." The way he said "supposedly" made the hair on my neck stand up. But I didn't ask for clarification. Some things I was better off not knowing. We spent the rest of the drive in silence. When we pulled up to the Mandarin Oriental, Raphael walked me up to the suite, checked it thoroughly like he was looking for something, then turned to face me. "I have to go to São Paulo for a few days. Business that can't wait. But Marco and my other security people will be nearby. You have their numbers. The hotel staff knows to be extra vigilant about your safety. And if Derek tries anything, I'll call," I promised. "Raphael, thank you. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me." Raphael moved toward the door, then paused. "Sophie, there's one more thing. While I'm gone, I think you should consider whether you want to stay in Miami long term." My stomach dropped. "You think I should leave? You said Derek wouldn't—" "It's not about Derek." Raphael turned back to face me fully. "It's about what you want for your life. You've spent the last 3 years living according to someone else's plans. Now you have a chance to start fresh, to decide what you actually want. Miami has too many memories for you now, of Derek, of who you were with him. Maybe you need a complete change of scenery." "Like São Paulo?" I asked carefully. Raphael's lips curved in a slight smile. "Like wherever you want, Sophie. São Paulo was just one option. But yes, if you wanted to come to Brazil, I could help you establish yourself there. No expectations, no strings, just a fresh start." "I'll think about it," I said, which was all I could manage. The idea of leaving Miami, leaving everything I knew, was overwhelming, but so was the idea of staying here, walking streets that held memories of Derek on every corner. After Raphael left, I spent the evening by the window again, my new favorite spot. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Dinner tomorrow? I want to see with my own eyes that you're okay." I smiled and texted back confirmation. Slowly, piece by piece, I was reclaiming my life. Tomorrow I'd see Lisa. Next week, maybe I'd go back to work. face whatever rumors Derek might have started, hold my head high. Eventually, I'd find my own apartment, one Derek had never been to, where I could build new memories untainted by his presence. But Raphael's words echoed in my mind. Maybe I needed a complete change of scenery. Maybe Miami held too many ghosts. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it might be Derek calling from a different phone. But curiosity won out. Hello? Sophie Reynolds? A woman's voice, professional and cool. This is Dr. Catherine Martinez from Miami-Dade College. I heard from Derek Winston that you might not be returning to your teaching position. My blood ran cold. Of course. Derek was already starting his campaign to damage my professional reputation. I told him that you're one of our best instructors and that I'd speak to you directly before accepting any resignation on your behalf. Dr. Martinez continued. Sophie, I don't know what's happening in your personal life, and you don't have to tell me. But I want you to know that your job is secure if you want it. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I do want to keep teaching. Derek and I are no longer together, and he's trying to. I understand. And for what it's worth, I never liked him. He came to your exhibition last spring and spent the entire time on his phone, barely looking at the art you'd so carefully curated. A man who can't appreciate your passion doesn't deserve your time. After we hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Derek had tried to take my job from me, just like Raphael predicted. But he'd failed. For the first time, someone had chosen to believe in me over him, to see through his polished exterior to the cruel man underneath. I looked out at the Miami skyline one more time that night, at this city I'd called home for 8 years. Maybe Raphael was right. Maybe I needed a fresh start somewhere else, somewhere Derek's shadow couldn't reach. But maybe I also needed to prove to myself that I could reclaim this city, make it mine again instead of letting him drive me away. I had time to decide. For the first time in 3 years, I had time and space and the freedom to choose. Whatever I decided, it would be my choice, made on my terms. And that, I was learning, was what freedom actually felt like. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my apartment in São Paulo, watching the sun rise over the city's endless sprawl of buildings. The morning air was warm and humid, carrying the sounds of a city waking up, traffic starting to flow, birds calling from the few remaining trees, someone practicing scales on a piano in a neighboring building. I'd made the decision to leave Miami 3 weeks after Derek's confrontation with Raphael. It hadn't been easy. I'd had to give up my teaching position, pack up my entire life, say goodbye to Lisa and the few other friends I'd managed to reconnect with. But Raphael had been right. Miami held too many ghosts, too many memories of the person I'd been with Derek. I needed space to figure out who I was without him. Brazil had given me that space. Raphael had helped me find this apartment in Jardins, a beautiful neighborhood full of tree-lined streets and art galleries and cafes. He'd introduced me to the director of the Museu de Arte de São Paulo, who'd hired me as an assistant curator. My Portuguese was still clumsy, but improving daily, and my colleagues were patient with my mistakes. Most importantly, I was learning to breathe again, to wake up without fear, to make decisions without second-guessing every choice, to believe that my thoughts and opinions had value. Raphael had kept his promise, no strings attached. He'd helped me get settled, checked in regularly those first few weeks, but never pushed for more than I was ready to give. Our relationship had evolved into something like friendship, built on mutual respect and the bond of shared trauma. He understood what it meant to grow up with violence, to carry the scars of someone else's cruelty. We didn't need to explain ourselves to each other, but things had shifted recently. He'd been in São Paulo more often than Miami, supposedly dealing with business interests here, though I suspected that wasn't the only reason. We'd started having dinner together once a week, Conversations that stretched long into the night as we talked about art and history and the complicated relationship we both had with our pasts. Last week, he'd kissed me goodbye on the cheek after one of our dinners, his lips lingering just slightly longer than friendship required. Neither of us had acknowledged it, but the air between us had changed, charged with a possibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Raphael's name on the screen. "Good morning," I answered in Portuguese, proud of how natural it was beginning to sound. "Your accent is improving," Raphael said warmly, switching to English. "Are you free today?" "I don't work Saturdays. Why?" "I want to show you something." "Can I pick you up in an hour?" He arrived in a different car than I was used to, a vintage convertible, cream-colored and elegant, perfect for the warm São Paulo morning. I slid into the passenger seat, and he handed me sunglasses and a scarf for my hair. "Where are we going?" I asked as he pulled into traffic. "You'll see." We drove out of the city, heading north through increasingly rural areas. The sprawl of São Paulo gave way to rolling hills and farms, the air growing cleaner and cooler. Raphael played Brazilian music through the car's speakers, bossa nova, soft and romantic, and we talked about nothing important, the kind of easy conversation that comes from genuine comfort with another person. After about an hour, he turned off the main road onto a long driveway lined with jacaranda trees, their purple flowers creating a canopy overhead. At the end of the drive sat a house. No, a small estate. White stucco with red tile roof, surrounded by gardens that looked like they'd been designed by someone who truly understood beauty. "What is this place?" I asked as Raphael parked. "Mine, or it was, briefly. I bought it 2 years ago with the idea of renovating it, but other priorities took over. I've been thinking about selling it, but I wanted you to see it first." We got out and walked through the gardens, overgrown but still magnificent, with winding paths and stone benches, and a fountain that no longer worked but was beautiful in its decay. The house itself was larger than it had seemed from the outside, with high ceilings and large windows that let in floods of natural light. "It needs work," Raphael said, as we walked through rooms that echoed with emptiness. "New plumbing, updated electrical, probably a new roof. But the bones are good. It could be something special with the right attention." "It's already special," I said, running my hand along a windowsill worn smooth by decades of sun. "Why are you showing me this?" Raphael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he led me through to a back room that must have been a studio once. Huge windows facing north, perfect natural light, enough space for several easels. "This is why," he said finally. "When I bought this place, I had some vague idea of it being a retreat, somewhere to get away from the city. But walking through it with you, I realized what it could really be." "What?" "A foundation. A place for women escaping situations like you escaped, like my mother escaped. Somewhere safe they could stay while rebuilding their lives, learning new skills, healing." He turned to face me fully. "I've been trying for years to legitimize my family's business interests, to move away from the things my father built his empire on. This could be part of that. Something good, something that helps people." I stared at him, overwhelmed by the scope of what he was suggesting. "Raphael, that would be incredible. But why tell me?" "Because I want you to run it." He said it simply, like he was offering me coffee instead of proposing I upend my life again. "I have the resources and connections to make it happen. But I don't have your understanding of what these women need. Your insight into the psychology of abuse, the slow process of rebuilding confidence and autonomy. You've lived it. You could help others through it." I walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown gardens, my mind racing. 6 months ago, I'd been terrified and trapped, convinced I'd never escape Derek's control. Now this man who'd rescued me was offering me a chance to rescue others, to turn my pain into purpose. It's too much, I said quietly. I'm still figuring out my own life. How can I help others figure out theirs? Because you've already done the hardest part. You've survived, and you're rebuilding. Raphael came to stand beside me at the window, not touching but close enough that I could feel his warmth. Sophie, you're stronger than you think. I saw that the first night in the restaurant, when you walked out despite being terrified. I saw it when you insisted on being there when I confronted Derek. I've seen it every day these past 6 months as you've built a new life in a foreign country. I had help. I had you. And these women will have help too. They'll have you, and they'll have the resources to make real change possible. But they need someone who understands what they're going through, who won't judge them for staying as long as they did, or for being scared even after they leave. I thought about all the articles I'd read over the past 6 months, trying to understand my own experience, trying to figure out why I'd stayed with Derek so long. I thought about the statistics. How many women returned to their abusers multiple times before finally leaving? How many were killed by partners who couldn't accept rejection? How inadequate the support systems were for women trying to escape. It would take a lot of work, I said slowly. The house would need months of renovation. We'd need staff, counselors, security, case managers. We'd need legal support, job training programs, childcare for women with kids. It's not just about having a safe place to stay. I know. Raphael's voice held barely contained excitement. That's why it needs someone like you running it, someone who understands all the layers of what these women need. I'd want to keep working at the museum too, I said, testing boundaries, seeing if he'd try to control this like Derek had controlled everything. At least part-time. I love curating, and I don't want to give it up completely. Of course, this project would take time to get off the ground anyway. You could transition gradually, build the program while maintaining your other work. We stood there in the empty studio, sunlight streaming through the windows, and I felt something slot into place inside me. This was what I'd been searching for, a way to make meaning from my suffering, to ensure that what I'd been through could help others avoid or escape the same fate. Yes, I said. Yes, let's do it. Raphael's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something younger, more open. He reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you, Sophie, for trusting me enough to do this. Thank you for seeing something in me worth investing in. I see everything in you. The words were quiet, intense, and suddenly the air between us was charged again with that electricity I'd been feeling for weeks. Raphael stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup my cheek. Sophie, I need you to understand something. What I feel for you, it's not about debt or obligation or gratitude. You don't owe me anything, but I care about you deeply, and I have for months. If you don't feel the same way, that's fine. We'll still do this foundation together, but if there's any chance... I kissed him before he could finish, standing on my toes to close the distance between us. His arms came around me immediately, pulling me close as he kissed me back with an intensity that made my knees weak. This wasn't like kissing Derek, which had always felt performative, like I was playing a role in his fantasy. This felt real and raw and right, like coming home to a place I'd never known existed. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Raphael rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for 3 months, he admitted. Why didn't you? Because I wanted you to have time to heal, to figure out who you are without someone else's expectations weighing on you. I didn't want to be another man telling you what you should want or feel. What if I want you to tell me what you want? I asked softly. What if I'm tired of figuring everything out alone? Then I want to build something with you, Raphael said. Not just this foundation, though, that too. I want to know what makes you laugh at 3 a.m. I want to argue with you about art and literature. I want to wake up next to you and make breakfast together. I want everything, Sophie. But only if that's what you want, too. I thought about Derek, about how he'd told me what I wanted, what I should feel, who I should be. How he'd taken my dreams and called them childish, my passions and dismissed them as hobbies. How he'd made me so small I'd almost disappeared entirely. Raphael was offering me the opposite, space to be myself, support to pursue my passions, partnership instead of control. It terrified me almost as much as it exhilarated me. I'm scared, I admitted. What if I'm not ready? What if I'm still too damaged from Derek to be in a real relationship? Then we go slowly, Raphael said simply. We figure it out together. Sophie, I'm not asking you to be perfect or healed or ready. I'm just asking you to be honest with me about what you need and what you're feeling. That's all. I can do that, I said, and realized I meant it. We spent the rest of the day at the estate, walking through each room, imagining what it could become. Raphael shared his ideas. 8 bedrooms that could house multiple women and their children, a commercial kitchen where cooking classes could be held, therapy rooms, a children's playroom, offices for case managers and counselors. I added my thoughts, an art studio like the one we were standing in, because creative expression had always been healing for me. A library full of books about women who'd overcome, who'd survived, who'd rebuilt. As the sun began to set, we sat on the front steps of the house, watching the sky turn pink and orange through the jacaranda trees. Raphael's arm was around my shoulders, and I let myself lean into his warmth, into this moment of perfect possibility. What happened with Derek? I asked suddenly. After that day at the coffee shop, I never heard from him again. Did he really just give up? Raphael was quiet for a moment. He tried once more, about 2 months after you left Miami. He hired a private investigator to try to find you. My people found out about it and made sure the investigator reported back that you'd moved to Europe, Portugal specifically, and were living with family there. As far as Derek knows, you're thousands of miles away and completely unreachable. And he believed that? He wanted to believe it, Raphael said. Men like Derek need to feel like they won in some way. Believing you'd fled the country rather than just moved on gave him that. His ego could handle you being so scared of him that you left the continent. It couldn't handle you thriving a few hours away with someone new. It made a twisted kind of sense. Have you heard anything about him recently? He's engaged. Raphael said it casually, but I felt him tense slightly, waiting for my reaction. To someone from his firm. They're getting married this summer. I waited for the stab of jealousy or hurt, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a wave of pity for whoever this woman was, this person who would learn too late what kind of man she'd promised to spend her life with. I hope she's stronger than I was, I said quietly. I hope she doesn't wait as long as I did to leave. You were strong, Raphael said firmly. You're one of the strongest people I know. It takes incredible strength to survive what you survived, to leave when you did, to rebuild the way you have. I didn't feel strong. I felt weak and trapped and pathetic. That's what abuse does. It lies to you about who you are. But Sophie, the real you, the person I've gotten to know these past 6 months, she's brilliant and brave and so full of fire. Derek never deserved you, not even on your worst day. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the Brazilian night coming alive with sounds, insects singing, a dog barking in the distance, music drifting from somewhere farther down the road. This felt like healing, I realized. Not the instant transformation I'd once imagined, but the slow, steady work of rebuilding a life one day at a time. When can we start on the house? I asked. As soon as you want. I'll call my contractor tomorrow. Have them come out for an assessment. And we'll need to register as a nonprofit, establish a board of directors, create intake protocols, hire staff. I was already making mental lists, planning, organizing. It felt good to have a project, a purpose beyond just surviving. We'll do it all, Raphael promised, together. A year ago, the word together would have filled me with dread. It would have meant losing myself, subordinating my desires to someone else's control. But sitting here with Raphael, planning this foundation that would help other women escape what I'd escaped, the word felt different. It felt like partnership, like mutual support, like building something bigger than either of us could create alone. Together, I repeated, and Raphael pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. We stayed there until the stars came out, talking about the future, the foundation we'd build, the women we'd help, the life we'd create together. It wouldn't be perfect. I still had nightmares sometimes, still panicked when I saw men who looked like Derek from behind. Raphael still carried the weight of his family's criminal past, still had business dealings he couldn't completely walk away from. We were both damaged in our ways, still healing from old wounds. But we were healing together. And slowly, day by day, we were building something new. Not just the foundation, but ourselves. Better versions of who we'd been, shaped by our scars, but not defined by them. As we drove back to the city that night, the convertible's top down and cool air rushing past us, I looked over at Raphael's profile illuminated by the dashboard lights. He caught me looking and smiled, reaching over to take my hand. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I'm grateful," I said honestly. "For that night at the restaurant, for your intervention, for everything you've done. But mostly for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For believing I was worth saving." "You saved yourself, Sophie," Raphael said softly. "I just opened a door. You're the one who had the courage to walk through it." Maybe he was right. Maybe survival was always a choice, even when it didn't feel like one. Maybe every small act of resistance, every time I'd argued back in my head, even when I couldn't speak aloud, every time I'd held onto a shred of my identity despite Derek's efforts to erase it, every time I'd imagined a different life even when I couldn't see how to reach it, had been a form of courage. I'd walked through that door Raphael opened, yes. But I'd also opened doors for myself, ones I hadn't even known were there. And now I would help other women find their doors, their paths to freedom, their ways back to themselves. The lights of São Paulo appeared on the horizon, millions of them spread across the hills like fallen stars. Somewhere in that vast city was my apartment, my job, my new life. And now there would be more. A foundation to build, women to help, a future with Raphael to explore. It wasn't the future I'd imagined for myself years ago before Derek, but it was better than I'd dared to hope for 6 months ago, standing in a hotel room with a stranger's keycard in my hand and terror in my heart. "Thank you for today," I told Raphael as we pulled up to my building. "Thank you for saying yes," he replied. "To all of it." He walked me to my door, and we stood there in the hallway for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Raphael cupped my face in his hands and kissed me softly, sweetly, with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "Bonne nuit, Sophie," he whispered against my lips. "Good night, Raphael." I watched him walk back down the hallway, then let myself into my apartment. It was small and simple, nothing like the luxury of Derek's place, or even the hotel suite at the Mandarin Oriental. But it was mine. Every stick of furniture, every piece of art on the walls, every book on the shelves. I'd chosen it all, arranged it all, made it mine. I made tea and stood on my balcony one more time, looking out at the city that had become my sanctuary, my new beginning. In the distance, I could just barely make out the lights of Jardins where that estate sat waiting to be transformed into something that would change lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa back in Miami. Monthly check-in. You still alive and happy? Because I need to know my best friend is thriving in her telenovela life. I smiled and typed back. Alive, happy, and about to start a foundation for domestic violence survivors. Also, maybe dating the Brazilian mob boss. Life is weird and wonderful. Her response was immediate. I knew it. I want details. All the details. Video call tomorrow? Tomorrow, I confirmed, warmth spreading through my chest. I had my best friend back. I had meaningful work ahead of me. I had Raphael and whatever we were building together. And most importantly, I had myself back. Not the same as I'd been before Derek, but stronger, wiser, more resilient. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and paused. The woman looking back at me had brighter eyes than she'd had 6 months ago. Her shoulders were straighter. Her smile was real. You did it, I told my reflection. You survived. You got out. You're building something beautiful. And for the first time in years, I believed it.